Do you realize that you were born for such a time as this? I bet you've never thought about it before. But as I was thinking about Queen Esther in the book of Esther in the Old Testament, I came across that term which says, for such a time as this. I looked at the young woman's life and found that she was an orphan. Her parents were dead. She was raised by an uncle. And the whole Jewish nation from the tribe of Judah were in bondage at that time, living in Babylon. They were under the tutelage of King Ahasuerus, who was the king of Susa at the time. At any rate, they were in bondage, to say the least. But the king had a queen who didn't do what he wanted her to do, so he dismissed her and decided to find another queen. Esther happened to be one of the young women in that community who was gathered up and taken to be prepared for the king. And he was going to have all these young women troop by him, and he was going to choose one to be his new queen. Esther happened to be the one that he chose. What was significant was the fact that God had a plan for this young woman's life. Even though she was an orphan and she had difficult things in her life that had kept her up until that time, Esther was chosen by God, not just by the king. Because you see, the Jewish people at that time were in danger of being annihilated because of the jealousy of someone in the king's court. And so God promoted Esther into the position of queen so that she could intercede with the king in behalf of the Jewish people. And this she did with great prayer, fasting, and finesse. And the king granted her position. Her petition to him was for the salvation of her people. And God used this young woman to save the Jewish people at that time. The Feast of Purim is still celebrated by the Hebrew people to this day because of what Queen Esther did. Now, you and I might never be a queen, maybe for a day, but we do have a place in society, and we do have a place in this world. According to Psalm 139, God knew us before we were ever conceived in our mother's womb. He chose us. He desired us. He knew us. And because of this, God has a purpose and an interest in each of our lives. You may never have thought about that before, and your circumstances might be very dire right now. But still, God has a place in His heart and His plan for each of us, and it's for such a time as this. You see, we were born at the right time, in the right place, to the right parents. We were not accidents. We were not mistakes. God knew us, planned for us, and still holds a place in His heart for us today if we want it. God is calling. He's asking us, will you let me put my plan into operation in your life with your consent for such a time as this? You see, every life is valuable. Every person is important. Every person has a place in this world to make a contribution. You are of value no matter what your circumstance, and God is calling us today. Please give consent for God to use your life and develop your life no matter what your circumstance, because of His great love for you today. He says in Isaiah 49, I have engraved you upon my hand. Can you think about that? Do you realize an engraving cuts into the thing that it's engraved on? If you were engraving gold, then the instrument used to do the engraving just cuts that name into that gold. God is saying, I cut your name into the palm of my hand. I tattooed you in there. I put you in there so you're never going to be lost. You're never going to pass away from my love. For such a time as this, would you consent to say yes?